Welcome to Hey Therapist. I'm your host, Leslie Ross. With me is my producer, Jay Wesley Lindley. Let's get mental. All right. Welcome back to Hey Therapist. I'm your host, Leslie. We've got Jay over here in the passenger seat, my production man of the plan. So we are coming from the Washburn Studios. Got the nice comfy chairs. I always forget to say that, so I have to throw it in the show notes. But I remember this time. And today we're going to talk about a pretty serious topic, which, I mean, a lot of my topics are serious, but I know this one can be triggering to some people. We're going to talk about sexual assault and general groping and other things that happen to women and men along the way. So it could be one of those episodes you have to mind yourself. I know it's something that most women have gone through, and for some it was way worse than others. For some it's way worse than others. I just want you to be mindful about this episode, and if there's anything that you need to stop listening to and turn it off, you won't offend me. Hell, I won't even know. So it doesn't really matter. Just do what you need to do when we're talking about these things. The topic came up because I had a friend ask me the other day, he had a situation at work. As a man, wanted to make sure he wasn't blowing it out of proportion because men don't experience things like women do as much as women do when it comes to sexual harassment and inappropriateness of men toward us and all of those things. So he works at a place that has some interns. These interns are in high school. One of the girls was being messaged and approached by someone who was above her, someone who had power in the company, and he had been messaging her, and it was an issue last year. Kind of thought it had stopped, I guess. They come to find out that, the messaging had continued throughout the time that she wasn't interning there and had escalated, and there were, conversations and comments in there about if you were 18, the things we could do and those types of things. And just for reference, he is like 26 and she is 17, which 17, fine. They're probably out there dating. She probably doing things with her people who are age appropriate. At that age, 26 to 17 is not appropriate. And I am not one to judge age gaps because at a certain point in life, it is just a number. It's all in life experience and maturity levels, because age doesn't necessarily mean mature. It's one of those things that once your brain is fully developed, 25, then you can move on to life stages, especially if you're in stages where no one's having kids anymore or whatever's happening and you're just adults doing life. Fine. Age gaps really aren't that big of a deal. It really is all in what people are comfortable with and how they feel. It's usually when we're just in these different life stages that age gaps really play a role and can create some conflict in a relationship. This one is particularly disturbing because she is very young. It's flattering when you're a high school girl and someone older than you may be hitting on you and finding you attractive and all of those things. But then if you step out of it, or you get a little older, it's one of those things now. It's like, oh, that's so cute. And then you get older and you're like, oh my God, that motherfucker was a creep. What does a 26-year-old man want with a high school girl? I mean, we know what they want, but why? Why go be age appropriate for a little bit? Like, you need to stop being with these people or trying to make these comments to this young girl. It really is predatory behavior because not only is this person in a position of power. This person is above her. He has a managerial role in this company. So it's hard to say, fuck off, stop being a creep. And she may not even feel comfortable saying that yet because she is so young. Me, in my adult life, if someone messages me something, I've been on enough dating apps. I've got enough dick pics, which when I get a dick pic, I just send one back. And then when they get all offended, I'm like, I thought that's what we were doing. I thought we were exchanging dick pics, man, because I didn't ask you to send me one. You didn't ask to get one, so we're even now. She's probably not at that point. She probably doesn't feel comfortable being like, bro, you're being creepy. And again, we're not dealing with a fully developed brain. So it is cute. It is flattering. It is nice to have someone, send these messages. And even if she doesn't find this person attractive, which I'm not sure on that part, but even if she did, not appropriate. If she doesn't, she's gonna probably just laugh it off. And at that age, you may just laugh it off too. You may be like, oh, that's funny. Yeah. And you may respond, but you may not have the wherewithal to say, stop. I'm not interested. It's never going to happen. Stop messaging me. It may be flattering to her. She may think he's harmless. And that's the other downfall, I think, of a lot of women in situations, and men probably too. I mean, people thought Ted Bundy was harmless, and Dahmer. There's a lot of people. If you watch any true crime, which if you've listened to this podcast, I love me some true crime. If you watch any of those, when they have those conversations about the perp, people always say, I would have never thought. They were such a nice person. Everything was fine. They would never say that to me. And that happens a lot, and we're going to get into some examples as we go, but it happens a lot in friend groups. It happens a lot for men with their friends or whatever when you're like, bro's creepy. They're like, oh, he's harmless. He just says those things. No, if my intuition is going off, or regardless, if I think he's creepy, period. You don't need to defend someone who people are finding creepy. It's one of those things that sometimes we have to step in to protect, especially young girls and boys. I mean, we hear about stories in schools where teachers have hit on students or been inappropriate with students, and the kids are usually like, well, it was fun. They made me feel good about myself. They liked me. And that's probably true because predators prey on people who are vulnerable, and the vulnerability shows to someone who's a predator. So someone else may not think that they're vulnerable. Their peer group may not think that they're vulnerable. The teachers or the managers or supervisors or whoever it is, they know who's vulnerable. They know what people's lives are like at home. So they target them. And, for girls, it's an assault, and then they feel guilty or shame because they went into it or they liked it. There's a lot of shame and guilt about sexual assault, especially for younger people, because bodies do what bodies do. And even though it may be an assault, it may feel good to the body. So it gets very confusing, and it's very hard sometimes for people to report or understand they need to report. You hear stories about young men who are like, oh yeah, I lost my virginity to my teacher, and it's a badge of honor for them when they're, 16, 17, 18, 19. Then they become adults and they have children or nephews or nieces, and they hear something about a teacher and they're like, oh my God, that's terrible. And if they really think about it, it's pretty terrible in their own life, but they may not recognize that at the time. And I would guarantee they don't a lot of times. Because most of the time it's not a violent assault, especially in situations like we've started talking about here. The person that you work with, the teacher, the other, it's usually not a violent assault. It's buildup. It's grooming behavior. It's sending these comments and making these little side notes and doing special things that make someone feel really special and vulnerable, and maybe even guilty for saying no to something else. We want to be aware of what's going on around us and with people that we work with and in our group. I had a guy that I worked with we talked about it on the last podcast, at the pump company that I worked at. And he was an older man. I was early to mid 20s at this time. And he was an older man, probably 50s, 60s. He constantly hit on all the young women and made comments about their bodies and made comments about the way they dressed and all of these things. And you just kind of had to laugh it off because we knew he had been reported, but he was buddies with the manager, and whoever reported him would get in trouble, or they would get fired, or they would get punished some way with work. You would lose the position you had or something to that effect. So a lot of this stuff happens and it doesn't get reported because people are fearful of the repercussions. But we just want to be sure that we're making it a safe space for everyone. And I know the Me Too movement was huge, and I'm so happy about the Me Too movement. And I'm going to make a controversial statement as a woman, is not all victims, I'm going to say that in quotation marks for you guys not watching the videos, not all victims are actually victims. There are people who make up stories. Now, should we default to possibly believing automatically? Yes. And then we do research. Then we ask questions. Then we do interviews. Then we find out if it's true or not. And that research and the interviews and everything has to be unbiased. I'm not talking about research by the buddies or the cronies above them in the same corporation, whatever it is. But there's a lot of good men who, because of some of these movements and the fact, I think with anything that comes onto the scene, and not that this is onto the scene, I'm gonna get hate mail. I'm bound to get hate mail on this one, but when something comes to the forefront, a lot of people jump on the bandwagon and a lot of people get involved, and the pendulums usually swing one way or the other. We start out without a good plan. So it was just Me Too movement. Everybody was believed without consequences, without question. I think we should ask questions, because there's people that can manipulate, and there's people that understand they're going to be believed, and they can be believable enough that they could tell a story on someone. And if it wasn't investigated and the people didn't do the proper channels, then a good person, male or female, because Me Too works both ways, male or female, could lose their careers or their families or their kids or something because someone made a claim and it was just automatically believed. And so, I think it falls into the guilty until proven innocent. But when someone's proven innocent, then I think we have to stop. Like, okay, then the story gets, before the story is blasted out there as the truth, let's do some due diligence. Let's make sure that this is a true story. But for a lot of people, it is. And I'm going to go into I hate that word. I'm going to go into some statistics. And these are only things we know that have been reported. So I know I've been assaulted. I never reported it. I know friends who have been assaulted and they've never reported it. I think there's a whole host of higher numbers that are not reported, but we're going to talk about what is reported. And the number comes out to about every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. Over half of women and almost 1 in 3 men have experienced sexual assault involving physical contact in their lifetimes. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 26 men have experienced completed or attempted rape. About 1 in 9 men were made to penetrate someone during his lifetime. And 1 in 3 women and about 1 in 9 men experienced sexual harassment in a public place. More than 4 in 5 female rape survivors reported that they were first raped before the age of 25, and almost half they were minors, so before the age of 18. Nearly 8 in 10 male rape survivors report they were made to penetrate someone before the age of 25, and about 4 in 10 were first made to penetrate as a minor. So that's 63,000 children a year are victims of sexual assault or abuse. And the majority of child victims who are 12 to 17, 34% of those victims, sexual assault and rape, are under the age of 12. 66 of victims of sexual assault and rape are age 12 to 17. It's happening. It's out there everywhere. 55% of it happens near or at home. 15% in a public space, 12% at a relative's home, 10% in an enclosed place like a parking garage, 8% at school. And so, a lot of people say, well, what were they doing? Were they setting themselves up? Were they open to it? 48% were sleeping or performing in another activity at home. 29% were traveling to and from work or school, or traveling to shop or run errands. 12% were actually at work, 7% were at school, and 5% were doing an unknown or other activity. So there's nothing for that little last 5%. I think it goes to show that, it's not just women that are assaulted, but it's a lot of women. And it's not all men that are doing the assaults, but it's a lot of men. I looked for same-sex assaults, and I couldn't find good numbers on that, but I know that happens, right? We know that happens. I just couldn't find good statistics that I trusted. So I didn't want to use anything I didn't trust. It boils down to it's really, really common, and it's really not talked about. And like I said, those statistics are pretty high, but we also know that that's not all of it. That's not all of the people that have experienced this. And it makes into pop culture. And, one of the things when I was writing, a lot of people think when they think about sexual assault and sexual harassment, they automatically think that the woman is the one being harassed or assaulted. But it made me think of the Shameless episode. I don't know if you guys watched Shameless. It was a great series. Kind of jumped the shark in the end, but whatever. Most of them do. But there is an episode where Carl, when he was working, had become a cop at the time, and he had met this girl, and she was super into him, and he was excited about it, and they were down in the basement, and they were starting to have sex, and he's like, no, you have to use a condom. You got to use a condom. Use a condom. Use a condom. And she put him in her, and they had sex, and he came inside her and whatever, and he was a little freaked out about it. Well, he goes to tell the story to Debbie, and she's like, she raped you. And he said, no. She just didn't use a condom. And she was like, did you want her to? And he said, yes. Did you tell her to stop? And put, yes. Then she raped you. And I think that's the difference that happens a lot of times is women most of the time know when something is an assault. And I don't know that men, because it's not talked about as much, because men aren't as open about it, because it's not, thrown out there as much as it is for women, they don't recognize it as much as assault. And he didn't even recognize it. It was just something he didn't want to do. It's done now, whatever. But he didn't even recognize that this was not consensual sex anymore when he said, no, I don't want to do that. And, one of the things that we preach out there, and we try to get all of our young people to understand it, older people to understand, is no means no. And no is a complete sentence. If you don't want to do something, if you want to stop, if you don't want to engage in conversations, you can say, no, I don't want to do that. Or simply no. And when we say no, the person on the other side of that needs to respect that. Because if not, then we're moving into some territory that's not so comfortable for a lot of people. What happens a lot of times is people get swept up in the moment, and they're in there, and you may be just making out and just doing all the things, and then someone wants to have penetration, and the other person may be like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. But the other, they press and they say, oh, it's okay. And they talk you into it. And there may be a fear factor associated with saying no, with saying you need to leave or getting up to leave. If you take someone back to your house and you want to reject them, in their brain, reject them. But, there were no promises made. This wasn't a condition of them coming over. It was, hey, come over. You're cool. Let's hang out. And so they come over to hang out, and then things lead to one another, and you're doing the things, and you say, no, you know what? No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to keep going. That person needs to respect that. Because no is no. If you're in a powerful position, like being someone's supervisor or manager, and you find someone attractive that's under you, or maybe even lateral. It could be lateral, but you're still maybe a higher position, or you're still in a leadership role. Even if it's mutual, at an adult level, even if it's mutual, the best advice I can give you is don't shit where you eat. It doesn't usually end well. You don't hear a lot of great love stories that came out of, well, we were working together and then one thing led to another. It usually doesn't end well. And then you've been put in a situation where, as that leader or in a supervisor role, that it could cost you your job because you're in that power role, regardless of if you think you don't have actual power, or you may not even be their manager. If you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, if you're the boss, if you're the CO, if you're whatever, I've also been watching Orange is the New Black again. I don't know why. I just turned it on the other day and have been watching, and they're talking about the COs, and they fall in love with the inmates, and they do these things with them. It's still considered an assault. It's still considered rape because they're in a position of power. That person is saying yes by choice, but also, can they say no? What's going to happen if they say no? So it's just a really good idea to not be involved with someone that you work with. And if you are, most HR departments have releases that can be signed. That's a mutual relationship agreement that says we're going into this together and no one's going to file any charges if it goes wrong and all of those things. So you want to look for that. I kind of mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, and it's believing people when they say this person creeps me out. I had a friend in my friend group, and I'm kind of a guy's girl. I have a lot of male friends. I always hang out with dudes, and back in college and after, my core friend group was a bunch of dudes. And there was one guy who was kind of an outside friend. He would show up at parties. He was like friends of friends. And he was creepy. And all of the girls would tell our guy friends, he's creepy. He's creeping me out. Oh, he's fine. He just doesn't, he doesn't think about what he says. When he's drinking, he just gets that way. But he would make comments about, girls, because we're in college or right after, right? We're dressed in little things and we want to look cute. And sometimes that's, low cut and cleavage is not, my cleavage does not give you permission to my body. It's my cleavage. If I want it out, I can have it out. It's just like the man that has his shirts taken in around his sleeves to make his biceps stand out more. Like, I think it's one of those things that it just, you show off the parts of your body that you like. And if it's your boobs, if it's your legs, if it's your arms, more power to you. Cleavage is not consent. We're not putting it out there for you to do with or think you can do with what you want. But he would make comments like, well, if she dresses that way because she wants people to look, or she dresses that way. And it's just like, no, bro, what? And he would follow people to bathrooms, and he would just make creepy comments. And we tried to tell our guy friends that, and they'd be like, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And, it's one of those things that I don't think is always understood or taken seriously, because we want to believe that our friends wouldn't do anything bad, but we don't know. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know what happens when people aren't around. There's certain things that, like this example of the party, like how we're dressed, that, a lot of people don't think about. And I'd like to say a lot of men don't think about it, but I think a lot of women who have never experienced things don't think about it. I like to take the stairs in places, but if I'm somewhere alone, especially parking garages or even hotels or other places, most of the time I'll take the elevator, because if there's going to be a camera, there's a camera in the elevators. There's usually not cameras in stairwells. Walking at night with two headphones in, walking ever with two headphones in. That's one of the things that I call it kind of penis privilege, because men can do these things. There are certain things that men can do that women can do. I'm not saying women can't do it. Women can do anything they want to do. That's not what this is about. But it's talking about your safety. And, a lot of things that guys don't understand that we have to do to stay safe. And I know I don't have a lot of male listeners out there, but I really hope that your men friends can listen to this and learn something, because, there's a reason we don't walk at night by ourselves. There's a reason we don't walk with two headphones in. There's a reason that, no one should walk looking down at their phone constantly. Like, you should have your head on a swivel. You don't know. And the world is a dangerous place. People get assaulted. We've talked about the statistics. People get abducted. People get all of these things, and you want to be as safe as you can. The laughing at the inappropriate jokes because you don't want to confront someone who's making an inappropriate joke, even if it's about your body. If you're not sure about this person, if it's not someone that you can confront or say something to, you may not want to say anything, and just allowing the inappropriate comments. I'm to the point, a lot of times if some dude makes a comment, I call him directly out on it because I don't care. If I was feeling unsafe, if I was in an unsafe environment, then sure, I wouldn't do that. But it's one of those things that we sometimes just have to laugh it off and move on. And being catcalled and oh, that ass, though, like, it's so annoying. It's not a compliment. There is not a woman out there in the world, unless it's coming from her partner. If my partner was like, oh, that ass, though, I'd be like, yeah, you like that. Some random dude, when I'm just walking through work, it's not cute. Saying women should smile more. It's not cute. We don't want to smile. I'm not smiling all the time like an idiot. I had a friend not that long ago talk about how he had taken an Uber home and the Uber had to wake him up. And he was like, oh my gosh, don't you hate it when that happens, when the Uber has to wake you up, or your Lyft driver or whatever? And I'm like, bro, women don't fall asleep in the back of Ubers or ride shares. Like, we don't have that luxury of falling asleep. Like, we would never feel comfortable with that. Most of the time we're on the phone with a friend. We've already shared location. We're talking about, even if you're going home alone, I can't tell you how many times I had Uber drivers make me feel a little uncomfortable when I was going home. And they were like, oh, and they ask, oh, are you going home alone? You got a boyfriend and you're trapped in the back of this person's car. Like, what are you going to say? I can't be like, just fuck off and drive. No, that's probably not a good idea. Oh, I'm like, oh, yep, I'm going home. I'm going home to my dog. Technically, he's my man. I could say he's my man. So you have to say these things, and the person may be harmless. They may legit be trying to make simple conversation, but there's enough news stories to show that they may not be. So we need to be safe. Dating apps. I've unfortunately been on dating apps before. They're terrible. Whatever. There's a difference in, and I think guys are getting better about being mindful and safe, because there's a lot of crazy women out there too, just as like there's crazy men that are going to try to do things. But when my friend group, when we were all on dating apps together, and we still share locations, but you send a screenshot of the dude's name, the picture, you send all the phone numbers that you have from them, what information you have to a friend. Hey, I'm going out with this person tonight. Here's the picture. Here's their phone number. Here's what they've told me their name is. I've gotten, this, we're going here. Here's my location. I'm going to share it with you. And so we had a whole little Life 360 group. It's just our friend group for when we were going out at night or going on dates or whatever it was. So someone knew where we were. Someone could check in. A lot of times I will use, especially in crowded places or when I was in the city walking or something like that, I would use the reflection of the window to see who's behind me. And I would have dudes be like, oh, you look pretty, it's fine, or yada da da da, and make comments. I'm like, bro, you're why I'm checking the windows. You're the reason. Because why are you, and sometimes it is a simple compliment, which is great. You can compliment me, I'll appreciate it. But when it goes too far, when it's inappropriate, the safety issue is there. Like, you should always check windows to see if someone's following you. Check around your car. Getting in, one of the most dangerous thing anyone can do, even not in the assault way, but, theft and carjacking and those types of things, which we live in a small town here, but it does happen. And it happens a lot of other places, is just getting in your car after you've been to Walmart or leaving the mall or whatever it is, and just sitting there with your doors unlocked. You're opening yourself up for someone to just hop in your car to do whatever. It's a scary thing, when you have to walk out and there's a weird car that has, kind of back doors, a little bigger vehicle with people sitting in it, and you have to go get in your car. It can be very unnerving. And these are the times when you trust that intuition. You say, something about this seems weird. It's, the stories of not pulling things off your windshield before you leave a parking lot. Or, if there's something on your car, you pull away and you check it, because there are those things that happen. Now, do those stories get blown out of proportion too? Sure. just like everything else. But I've been followed in Walmart. I've been followed in Hobby Lobby. I've had people parked next to me that made me so uncomfortable that I went in my passenger door, locked the door behind me, and then climbed over to the driver's seat. And these people were watching me. It's not me just being paranoid. They watched me walk out of the store. They were watching me walk up. They watched me. So it wasn't me just being paranoid or like, oh, they're watching me. It was unnerving. It made me really uncomfortable. And I've worked with and around too many law enforcement people who keep me safe. It's those things that we don't think about as a safety issue. It's really scary to be putting a kid in the car seat as a woman sometimes in certain situations. You're very vulnerable, and your child is very vulnerable because you're manipulating a car seat, buckling them in, shutting the door, opening the other door, getting in the car, and locking those doors as fast as possible. It can be really unnerving, and there's a lot of things and a lot of safety precautions that I do think women have to take more of, but it's, I want men to be aware of them too, which is why I know this is heavy women focused, but I want the men out there that are listening to have their friends listen, because this is why women are fearful, is because of these situations that do happen. And the men that step up, they're so appreciated. The man that volunteers to walk you to your car that's not a creep or has been like, listen, there's something about this I don't like. Let's get security and I'll stand here with you. Or if someone makes an inappropriate comment, it may be a stranger, but they'll stand up for you. It's one of those things that, you grow up and being like, oh, you don't know what men are thinking. You don't know what men are thinking. You don't know what men are thinking. And then we get older and everybody's like, well, why do you think men think that way? Why do you think you would? Well, because we were warned our whole lives. And also there's statistics that show we should. Having to carry around your drink at the bar. And, you have to be wary and not set your drink down and not accept drinks from someone. I've been drugged at a bar. It's really uncomfortable. Luckily, I had good friends there who weren't drugged and knew that I was out of sorts and took me home and made me safe. But, if I would have been with a wilder bunch and some dude was hitting on me and I acted interested because I had been drugged, then they may have been like, okay, cool, go have fun. And so it's one of those things that it's not absurd to protect ourselves. And what I really want men to understand is when we're doing these things, if someone says, let me buy you a drink, and you say, okay, I'll go to the bar with you, it's not because we don't trust you, but it's because we don't trust you. And if you are a decent man, you should understand that. And a lot of times it takes people having children to go, oh my God, that's really unsafe. Instead of thinking, you're just being overreacting. It's not going to happen that way. But it really does. People get drugged. People do things to drinks. We have to be mindful. We have to watch our drinks. We can't set that down. We can't, have someone walk up and hand you a drink. Like, I'm not drinking that. I appreciate it. And it may be just someone being super nice and wanting to buy me a drink. And I love that. But I'm not going to drink a drink that I did not watch the bartender make and hand straight to me. It's just unsafe. If you are a decent man, you should understand that. You should understand why I'm not comfortable walking with you to your car, or you walking with me to my car that's in this parking garage and I don't know who you are. You should understand, on dating apps, and going back to that, when you ask for a last name or something, guys will be like, oh, why are you, do you want to look me up? And I'm like, well, bro, now I am, because you just got defensive because I asked you a last name. But if we would have met in person, you would have given me your last name, or you wouldn't have had a problem answering that question. It's so weird. And I know there's a lot of incels and, terrible people on dating apps, and that's why I'm not on them. But it's one of those things that everyone should understand where someone is coming from. And I think that because men and male groups don't experience it like women do, they do feel like some of the safety precautions are irrational. They don't understand why I love a good gentleman. Open my door, pull out my chair. I love it. pick me up, but you're not going to pick me up on our first date if I just met you through a dating app, because I have no one to associate you with. If you're a friend of a friend and we're, start talking or whatever, cool. But if I just met you on some dating app and you're like, no, I'm going to pick you up. No, you're not, bro. And the more insistent you are about it, the more nervous you're making me. Because why do you need to pick me up? Why? Like, I understand you want to be a gentleman. If that's your story, you want to be a gentleman. Okay, when I get there, I'll call you and you can come out and open my car door. You can pull out my chair. You can do all of the other things. But I'm not letting you come to my house and pick me up when I don't know who you are. It's just poor planning. I've talked a lot about the women, but I don't want to leave the men out. I know a lot of men who have been assaulted. There's a Friends episode again. We'll go back to TV episodes where Chandler's boss keeps slapping his ass and he hates it. And everybody, the other workers are like, oh, it's your turn. We've all been there. And it's super uncomfortable. And he tries to figure out a way to say that he doesn't like it or whatever. But it's assault. I know a lot of things happen in locker rooms that men don't talk about. A lot of things happen in fraternities that men don't talk about. In the military that men don't talk about. There are things that happen to men that they justify, just like women justify, as, oh, it was just part of it, or it was one of those things, it just happened once, whatever. But it's still assault. It's still inappropriate, unwanted touch. And it's just, I think there is an interesting difference between men and women when it comes to what they feel is appropriate and what we feel is appropriate, and safety things that we can do that they can't do and they can do that we can't do, that lead to, us needing to protect ourselves. But, it affects millions of people in the United States. And that's, again, an underestimate because it's not always reported. And, there's guilt, there's shame, there's embarrassment. I've known a lot of men who were sexually assaulted as children, and they don't talk about it. They won't talk about it. They won't deal with it. They have issues now with touch or with sex or whatever it is that have come from this trauma, but they don't want to be a victim, if you will. And if it's unwanted and you aren't in control, then you are a victim. But that doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean anything about who you are. It just means that a thing happened to you. So it's important to talk about these things and work through these things. Now, if you know someone who is assaulted, there are some things that you want to do to keep yourself safe. And it's one of those things that, it's not wonderful to talk about. But if you do get assaulted to the point where it's a violent assault or a rape, you want to report it as early as possible. You want to call the police. As much as you're going to want to, do not take a shower. Do not wash any clothes. Do not, get rid of anything that has been touched, because that's all evidence. And so you want to, get to the hospital. You want to take those things with you. You want to tell them what's happened and have them do what they need to do. And they'll get police there. They'll do, the questioning. They'll do everything they need to do in a discreet and respectable way so that you don't continue to be victimized. But it's one of those things that if you don't report it, then it could happen to someone else. And I'm not saying that to give guilt to anyone that hasn't reported anything, because the reality is it's your story to tell. And if you don't want to tell it, you don't want to tell it. But there are resources out there. You want to report it if it's, workplace, if it's harassment, if it's those things. If it's something that makes you uncomfortable, report it to someone who will be a good advocate and who could intervene for you. And if someone is, sending those messages or whatever, block them. I don't care who they are. Block up, say, no, I don't want this. You need to stop. If they don't stop, then you block them. Then you report them to whoever. You blast them on Facebook. We see that shit all the time, right? So just screenshot and blast away. Send it to the mama. Say, your boy's acting out. Your girl's acting out. Look at this crap. Whatever it is to do to get that done. And, for more information or more resources, one of the best resources out there is the RAIN website, and it's RAIN with 2 N's. So RAINN.org. And they have their hotline number, which is 1-800-656-HOPE or 800-656-4673. They have an app. You can download an app. They have a chat line. They have text available. They have all of the ways that you can get resources that you need and that you want. That way you can reach out to get an advocate before you do anything. And again, I know today was, it's a big topic, but there's some things that just are interesting too, even if you're not, talking about the assault side. And it's just the way men and women operate differently in the world when it comes to sexuality and dress and what goes on with that. So that's one of the other things I found interesting when I was thinking about this episode is I call it jokingly penis privilege, because there's a lot of things men can do that women can't. Some of it's just not fair, but it's the reality of it. Because the reality is if a woman did whatever, she may become a victim. And if a man does it, he's probably not going to become a victim. There's other things that are just, just weirdness. Like, again, the things where you should be safe that you may not be. Falling asleep in the Uber, doing those types of things. So, anyway, that's the episode for today. And sorry if anyone triggered and stopped listening. You didn't hear this either, but hopefully everyone is safe and taking care of themselves. And we'll see you next week. For my producer, Jay Lindley, I'm Leslie Ross. Thank you all for joining us. Please send any questions or comments through the website, heytherapist.com, or email help@heytherapist.com. They may be featured on the show anonymously. Hey Therapist is an SEOK radio production and is for your entertainment purposes only. Thank you for joining us. Make good choices.